about to introduce is a rare talent. He not only sings, he sings fine gospel, but he's a fantastic writer. His composition of My Tribute can be found in many of our modern-day hymnals. He's a Grammy Award winner 4 times over. A dynamic performer.
A pleasant good evening to our listeners. We want to thank you for joining us this evening. We have a very special program. We're going to be doing a live interview with 2 members of the GITE team, Grenada Institute for Theological Education. And the topic that we're going to talk a bit about is building climate resilience in the Christian community. And we want to talk about that issue because it's something that is relevant for today, something that we don't talk about as a church, but we believe the time has come for us to do that. So I'm going to invite my 2 guests to come into the studio this evening, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to our listeners. So, guys, you can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening. So I'm going to start with Reverend Lois. Could you introduce yourself? And then we're going to go to another guest, Ms. Duncan.
Thank you, Trevor. It's always good to be on Hope FM. And we thank you for the privilege to come and share with you on this very special topic. I'm the director for the Grenada Institute for Theological Education. And this evening, we want to encourage our viewers and listeners to participate in a special event happening on Saturday. And so we'll give you further details.
Good. So, Ms. Duncan, introduce yourself to our listeners, both online and that are streaming.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Martina Duncan. I am a climate change specialist and one of the facilitators for the training that we would be discussing this evening.
Good. So, quickly, could you give us a quick overview as to what this training is about and what's the objective that we hope to achieve with this training? Reverend Lewis, could you speak to that?
Sure. So this is a special effort for the church community that we're embarking on, and it's building climate resilience in the Christian community. And so the goal is to provide an education, information on the importance and significance of how, as a church community here in Grenada, can make a difference in the issue of climate changes and how it affects us here in Grenada in a particular way. We have facilitators, presenters who will be at the workshop here on Saturday at the Kirani James Stadium. And this is going to be on Saturday. It starts at 8:30 and goes until about 1 o'clock. And so we want to encourage folks to be there on time so we could get started in this process.
And who is this training open to?
Well, it's actually open to the public in a sense. We're particularly gearing our folks who live in the St. George area, because this is going to be a parish by parish training. Our next training is scheduled for St. David on the 24th of this month. And so we are moving right across the nation in each of the parishes, and we'll give you further updates of where they will be and the times they will be conducted.
Okay. So, Miss Duncan, could you tell us, what would the training cover? What some of the topics or the issues it will cover, and then we will talk a little bit about why we targeted the church. So, quickly, what are some of the topics that will be addressed?
Okay, so the training will address 5 main topics. First, we will start with an introduction to climate change so we can get a bit of a refresher. What is climate change? What causes climate change? And the impacts of climate change on our lives. Then we'll go into stemming from the impacts, also disaster risk management for climate-related disasters. Also, we would look at how do we cope and how do we prepare for and how do we respond to climate change. So this covers climate change adaptation, which is on the resilience side and what we do um, to mitigate or reduce the impacts. And then we have climate change mitigation, where we look at the practices that we can do to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So things like energy savings and so on. And finally, we would look at the topic is resource mobilization and climate financing. So different sources of finance that we can access to undertake the practices that we, climate change, adaptation, mitigation, and disaster risk management practices.
Okay. Um, Anybody? Why target the church at this time, the Christian community? Why do you think that it is important for us to pay attention to this issue?
Well, there are some biblical principles outlined in scriptures, of course, that places responsibility on the church as a community. And just for reflection briefly, Genesis 1:27-28 states, so God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created him male and female, he created them. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So there's a creation mandate. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion. So there's a creation mandate that God has given the church. And we believe that from a biblical point of view, GITE, being a theological institute for training, wanted to offer this training particularly focused to church leaders and members of the church community at large. But there's also a cultural mandate. How do we have dominion and give leadership in this area? I think for some reason the church has, in some ways, abdicated this responsibility and have given it to other organizations or institutions to care for the earth. But this mandate was first given to the church. When God created the earth, the mandate was given to fulfill the cultural mandate. And so God gave humans the cultural mandate to rule creation under God's divine blessing. So we have to steward and take care of God's creation. And we've all seen the impacts um, of disasters in Grenada and across the globe, of course. And so um, the church has a grave responsibility how we take care of the issues that affect us right on, especially small island nations like ours that we live in.
Somebody may say, what that has to do with the Christian life. But when a disaster happens, so for example, when Ivan came, every one of us living on this piece of rock, and also we all, if we didn't have the resources to respond afterwards, we all suffered. So for some months or years, some churches went on rebuilt, were not rebuilt, and members had to be worshiping on the tarpaulin, etc. Martin, I heard you mention the whole issue of resource mobilization. Is the church playing catch up with that is concerned? And if you could just talk a little bit about what you will deal with regards to that resource mobilization issue.
Okay. Well, I mean, church members are integral members of our communities and our society. It's not, you're not only a church goer, you're not only a Christian, So, you have to tie in everything into the mix. How do you prepare for what's to come? We know that climate change is going to cause some impacts on our society and on our lives. Whether it be more intense storms and hurricanes, the drought, heat waves, and heat stress on us and on our pets and our animals, our livestock and our plants. And and our clients and so on, right? So in terms of that, we need to prepare. So in terms of we look at one of the challenges that we have in terms of preparation is that lack of financing. We don't have the resources that we need to really put ourselves in a place that we can really adapt to climate change or mitigate climate change, right? So there are various sources of financing that persons and organizations and institutions can tap into once you meet the minimum requirements of whatever the organization or the grant or loan or facility is, financial mechanism or facility is. So we would speak a bit about that, what some of the minimum requirements are, what types of funding is available locally and internationally that persons can access to prepare, conduct adaptation, climate change adaptation and mitigation activities
Okay.
on the church buildings, and of course, whether also in our daily lives as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're going
So
to discuss that.
whether you're a Christian farmer, a Christian engineer, whatever, there are
Yeah,
resources available for you, so we could tap in, whether as a community or as an individual. The issue of insurance, access to insurance, etc., needs to be looked at.
yeah.
Who is funding this training? If you could just talk a little bit about who is funding it and why the resources is available to fund it.
Martina, you want to?
Sure. Right. So the project is funded by the Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program. Is established to provide provide local support to organizations and institutions for various climate change adaptation and mitigation activities, resilience building activities, which is administered by the United Nations Development Program. And there's an office here in Grenada, so the grant funding was provided for this activity.
Because the Christian community is always playing catch up, and while there is free money, as you say, grant sources, we oftentimes fail to address that. Reverend Lewis, with the closing remarks, why do you think we find ourselves in that position where we always playing, running after it hits and then it has passed?
Yes, I think sometimes we stay in our comfort zone. It's much easier to stay within the context of preaching and teaching the scripture, which is our primary responsibility. But the gospel is a holistic gospel. The message of salvation involves the whole person,
Okay.
mentally, physically, socially, and spiritually as well. So we need to take care of the whole person. And when we're affected by hurricanes and storms and disasters, it is not only our soul is affected, the entire human body is affected by needs and disasters. So we tend to have stayed for most part within the context of the salvation message. But the salvation message is a holistic message. We tend to compartmentalize the gospel into the spiritual person. But we have the gospel as Jesus proclaimed when he came on the scene. He said, is to present the gospel to everyone, those who are poor, those who are burdened, bankrupt, and captives, and that includes everyone.
Okay.
And I think sometimes we have dissected the gospel message in small portions rather than to give the complete and holistic view of what the Bible teach about redemption, creation of mankind.
Okay. Great. So, for listeners, we have come to a 15-minute slot about this topic, but they're going to come back and we're going to have a whole program, maybe a 1 or 2 hour program to talk about this issue because it's so interesting. And Saturday morning, from 8 to 12 to 1 o'clock. They're going to be having this program at the Carolina James Studio, ground floor, the ground floor conference room. And we want to ask if you have the time, you can come across there, because they're going to be giving some good information that could help us to recover more quickly from an event. So thank you, Dr. Lewis. Thank you, Ms. Duncan, for your input today. And we want to invite you back to Hope 103.1 FM very soon to talk about this issue and to give the audience some more information. Okay, good evening. Thank you for joining
Thank you.
us.
Thank you, and good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you.